My parents always favored my sister, so I moved out. 6 months later, they're begging me to come back, but I discover a photo album that reveals the shocking truth about my childhood. Before watching the video, drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. I'd also really appreciate a like and a subscribe. The most interesting comment will be included in the next videos. Thank you to each and every one of you. Enjoy watching. I'm Alex, 28 years old, male, and I've been carrying this knot in my chest for so long it feels like part of me now. My parents, Mark and Linda, were the kind of people who loved appearances. Our house always looked like it belonged in a Better Homes magazine spread. Spotless kitchen, curated holiday decorations, the whole facade. But underneath, it was never equal. My sister Emily, 26, could do no wrong. I was the difficult one, the kid who never met expectations, no matter how hard I tried. It started small, birthday gifts that were night and day. Emily got a brand new bike with a bow on it when she turned 10. I got socks, literal socks. At first I told myself I was being dramatic, that maybe money was tighter when it was my birthday, but the pattern repeated. She got dance lessons, tutors, weekend trips with mom. I got lectures about responsibility and being grateful for what I had. One memory still burns. Sophomore year, I brought home a straight A report card. My dad glanced at it, nodded once, then asked if I'd taken out the trash. The same week, Emily got a B+ on a history test, and they threw her a study celebration dinner. That's when I started realizing it wasn't about what we did. It was about who we were in their eyes. Emily was golden. I was extra weight. I stayed anyway, because you convince yourself it'll change, that one day they'll see you. I worked 2 jobs through college, paid my own tuition, barely asked them for anything. Emily dropped out after 2 semesters, and they framed it as her finding her true path. I still remember Dad hugging her, saying, "We'll support you no matter what." When I asked for the same support, just a little recognition, Mom snapped, "Why can't you be more like your sister and stop making everything about you?" The breaking point came 6 months ago. Family dinner. Emily announced she was moving back home to reset, and my parents acted like she was returning from war, throwing their arms around her, talking about how they'd redo her old room. I made a joke. Something like, "Guess I'll just stay in the basement then." My dad turned to me, stone cold, and said, "If you don't like it, maybe you should move out." So I did, that night. Packed a duffel, grabbed my essentials, and drove to a crappy apartment across town. No goodbye, no speech, just gone. For the first time in years, I could breathe. But here's the wild part. 6 months later, they're suddenly calling, texting, begging me to come back. Something's shifted, but I don't know what yet. And when I finally return to that house, there's a photo album waiting for me. The kind that makes your stomach drop before you even flip the first page. When my mom first called me, her voice cracked in a way I'd never heard before. Not the sharp, commanding Linda who always had an answer, but almost desperate. "Alex, honey, we miss you. Can you please come by this weekend? It's important." I nearly hung up. 6 months of silence after being told to move out, and suddenly I'm honey again. My first instinct was that Emily needed something. She always did. But I agreed, half out of morbid curiosity, half because some pathetic part of me still wanted answers. When I pulled into the driveway, everything looked the same. The pristine lawn, the polished shutters, the same carefully curated image of the perfect suburban home. But inside, the energy was off. Emily was slumped on the couch in sweatpants, scrolling on her phone, looking like the world had chewed her up. My dad, Mark, was pacing. My mom was wringing her hands. Alex, Mom started, forcing a smile. We just want our family back together. I leaned against the doorway. Family? Or your emotional punching bag? That got me the classic Mark glare, the same one that used to shut me down as a kid. But this time, I didn't flinch. It didn't take long for the truth to spill. Emily had crashed. Again. Her reset turned into skipping jobs, blowing through credit cards, and apparently one really bad relationship that ended with her coming home in tears. My parents looked tired, older. They weren't begging me back because they'd had an epiphany about loving me equally. They were begging because they needed me to stabilize the chaos. I almost walked right out. But something made me stay. Maybe spite, maybe curiosity. That's when I noticed it. A thick photo album sitting on the dining table. It was out of place, like it had been left there in a hurry. The cover was cracked leather, the kind of thing you'd only drag out for nostalgia. I don't know why I picked it up. Maybe because my name was on the spine in faded gold ink. Alex Childhood. My stomach tightened. I flipped the first page, expecting the usual. Birthday parties, school photos. But the pictures weren't what I remembered. At all. There's one of me at 5 years old sitting on the living room floor. Except, I wasn't smiling. My face was blotchy, tears still streaking down. The caption underneath in Mom's neat handwriting. Difficult again. Another page. Me, maybe 7, holding a drawing. I remember being proud of that drawing, but Mom had written, always showing off. Page after page, moments I remember differently, twisted with captions dripping in disdain. Meanwhile, the back half of the album, Emily's section, was glowing. Our shining star. So gifted. Makes us proud. My hands started shaking. It wasn't favoritism by accident. It was documented. Intentional. They had been writing the narrative of who I was supposed to be. The problem child. Since before I even understood what the word difficult meant. I looked up from the album and my mom's face went pale. My dad cleared his throat like he was about to lecture me again, but the words stuck. And Emily just muttered, "Oh, God," under her breath. That album wasn't just memory, it was proof. And it was about to change everything. I set the album down slowly like it was something toxic. My pulse was pounding in my ears. You wrote this," I said, my voice low, almost steady, though inside I was boiling. Mom started to protest. "Alex, you don't understand." "No, Mom, I do understand. You've been scripting me as the villain since I was in kindergarten." I flipped another page, shoved it across the table toward them. A picture of me at 8, mud on my jeans after a soccer game, grinning with missing teeth. Caption. Always messy, never like Emily. Emily's head jerked up from her phone. For once she wasn't smirking. She looked ashamed, but she didn't say a word. Dad stepped forward, his voice sharp, defensive. "We were just documenting reality. You were difficult, Alex. Always stubborn and always—" "Stop!" I snapped. My chair screeched across the floor as I stood. I was a kid. You labeled me difficult, so that's all you ever saw. And you... I pointed at Emily, who flinched. Got to be perfect, because they decided it before you even knew how to spell your own name. Emily finally spoke, voice soft. "I didn't ask for that." I laughed, bitter. "No, you didn't, but you sure as hell played the part." The air got heavy. Mom started crying, full-on sobbing and clutching her chest like she was the victim. "We were just trying to encourage you differently." "Differently!" I barked. I grabbed the album and slammed it shut, hard enough that the sound made everyone jump. "You gaslit me out of my own childhood. You erased every good thing I did and turned it into a flaw." That's when Dad lost it. His face went red, veins bulging. Enough of this crap. You think your little pity party matters when your sister is falling apart? She needs us. She needs you. And you're standing there crying about old photos? Grow up, Alex. Something inside me snapped. Years of being told I was lesser. Years of swallowing it, trying to be the reasonable one. It all came out. I hurled the album across the room. It slammed into the wall, photos scattering like shrapnel. Emily gasped. Mom screamed, and Dad charged toward me like he was about to put his hands on me. I squared up, my fists clenched, shaking, not with fear, but with fury. Don't you dare! My voice cracked, but it carried more power than anything I'd ever said to him. For the first time in my life, Mark stopped. He froze, breathing hard, glaring at me like he didn't even recognize me. Emily was crying now, too, quietly, but Mom rushed past me to pick up the scattered photos, sobbing, whisperings, "Not like this, not like this." But it was like this. And it wasn't going back. Because for the first time ever, I wasn't the quiet, compliant scapegoat. I wasn't their difficult child. I was the one holding the truth. The silence after I told Dad not to touch me was thick, like the whole house was holding its breath. For a second I thought maybe he'd back down. But then his hand shot out, not to hit me, but to grab the nearest thing in reach. The lamp. It was one of Mom's prized pieces, this crystal monstrosity she'd bragged about buying from an antique shop. He ripped the cord from the wall and hurled it at the floor. It shattered, glass exploding across the hardwood. "You think you're the victim!" he bellowed, pointing at me with a shaking hand. "You ungrateful little bastard. We fed you. We gave you a home. And all you ever did was whine that it wasn't enough." Mom screamed his name. "Mark!" But she didn't go to me. She went to him, grabbing his arm, begging him to calm down. That was the moment I knew, really knew, that I'd never mattered to them. Not in the way Emily did. Not in the way even Mark's pride mattered more than my safety. Emily's voice cut through the chaos. "Stop it, both of you!" Everyone froze. Emily never yelled. She was the golden child, the quiet favorite. But now, she was standing, tears streaking down her face, her phone tossed aside. "This isn't about Alex being ungrateful. You—" She pointed at Dad, her finger trembling. "You've been crushing him since we were kids, and you—" She turned to Mom, her voice breaking. "You let it happen. You made it happen." Mom looked like she'd been slapped. "Emily, don't—" "No," Emily said louder. "I wasn't perfect. I messed up. I quit school. I've failed more times than I can count. But you kept covering for me while you destroyed him. And now you're shocked he walked away?" Dad's face was crimson, his fists clenched. "Don't talk to me like that. You're no better—" Emily didn't let him finish. She grabbed one of the scattered photos off the floor and shoved it against his chest. "You want to talk about who's better? Look at this. You wrote down his whole childhood like a case file, like he was some broken project instead of your son." Dad shoved the photo away so hard it bent in half. His breathing was ragged, and I could see in his eyes that he wanted to explode again. The same rage I'd seen 1,000 times, but now it was directed at both of us. In that moment, something shifted. For once, Emily wasn't on their side. She was on mine. But the damage was already done. Glass all over the floor, photos torn, Mom sobbing, Dad trembling with fury. And me? For the first time, I didn't feel small in that house. I felt dangerous, like I had the power to finally burn down the lie they'd built. And I wasn't about to let them rewrite the ending. Update. Holy hell, I did not expect this to blow up the way it did. I posted about finding that photo album and standing up to my parents, and I've been glued to my phone ever since. Some of y'all were hilarious. OP Eat the Album Into the Sun had me actually laughing. And some of you made me cry in the best way. Thank you for saying I wasn't crazy, that the favoritism was real, because for years, they made me feel like I was imagining it. Anyway, I went back. I couldn't just leave things hanging after the explosion with the lamp, and Emily finally siding with me. The house was still wrecked when I walked in again. Shards of crystal from the lamp in the corner, photos scattered everywhere. Mom had taped some of them back into the album like patching it up would erase what happened. When she saw me, she actually lit up, like I was a prodigal son returning. Alex, thank God you came back. We can put this behind us. Behind us? I pointed at the tape pages. This isn't behind us. You literally tried to rewrite my life. And Dad... I gestured to him sitting stiff on the couch, jaw locked, arms crossed. Nearly smashed my head with a lamp. You think I'm here to sweep it under the rug? Mark glared at me. You're still dramatic as ever. And here's where it gets wild. Emily, of all people, grabbed the album, ripped out one of the pages, and held it up. You want to know why Alex left? This. You made his whole identity about being a screw-up, and you're still doing it. Then she crumpled the page and threw it into the fireplace. The look on Mom's face, like her shrine had been defiled. She actually lunged for Emily, shrieking, "Stop it! That's our family history!" Emily shoved her off. "No, Mom, it's your propaganda." Something inside of me clicked right then. If my parents wanted to curate their fake perfect story, then maybe it was time I told the real story, loudly, publicly, with receipts. So I scooped up the album, photos spilling from the binding, and told them straight, "You built this narrative to make me the villain. Now I'm going to show everyone what you really did." Mom gasped like I just threatened murder. Dad stood up, his face purple. "You wouldn't dare." "Oh," I said, tucking the album under my arm. "Watch me." I left them standing there in the wreckage of their fake perfect house, Mom wailing, Dad shouting after me. Emily followed me to the door, eyes red but steady. She whispered, "Do it! Burn them down!" And for the first time, my sister wasn't the golden child. She was my ally. They say revenge is ugly until it looks like justice. 6 months of holding that album felt like carrying a hand grenade with the pin out. I knew I had to pull it at the exact wrong, sharp right moment so it would actually do something. I scanned everything that night in my tiny apartment. Every caption in Mom's loopy handwriting, every photo where they'd circled Emily and wrote praise in glittery ink while slapping difficult on anything I did. I typed the captions out exactly as they'd written them and put them side by side with the photos. No editorializing, no screaming, just proof. Morning I printed enough copies to choke the mailbox, copies for each of their siblings, for cousins I'd never liked, for old PTA moms who still talked about lawn care and book clubs. I uploaded a thread to the neighborhood group, the place where they always post casserole recipes and lost dogs, with a few of the worst pages, and a simple headline, "My parents curated our childhood. Here's the proof." Then I hit send. That's when the house started making noise. Mark, in a voice that sounded like he'd swallowed gravel, began calling every person in his phone like a man trying to stop a flood. I went to their doorstep at noon, not to beg, not to make peace, just to drop an envelope in their mailbox. Emily met me at the top of their porch, hair in a messy bun, mascara making tracks down her cheeks. "You sure?" she mouthed. I nodded. What happened next wasn't subtle. Within 20 minutes, their neighbor's group chat exploded. Cousins I hadn't heard from since high school texted WTF and is this real? Mark stormed out, red-faced, shoving papers into his hands as if the more he held, the more real he could be. Mom came to the door and started crying like an opera soprano, screeching, hands flailing, and Dad shoved past her to grab me. He yanked one of the printed pages out of my hand and ripped it in half. Not with words this time, with movement. Neighboring windows opened. Mr. Patel across the street, who'd always praised Mark for his hedge job, came out and hissed for them both to calm down. But Mark didn't stop at tearing paper. He stormed to my car and kicked the passenger door so hard it dented. A kid across the street started filming. I pulled my phone and recorded everything, because I learned that receipts are the only thing that kept him from rewriting reality. Then Mark went nuclear. He called his brother, who drove over with a muscle-bound friend, and started yelling at me in our driveway, pointing and cursing like they'd discovered a traitor. Mom, meanwhile, was wailing to anyone who'd listen that I'd publicly shamed the family, weaponizing shame like it was a cudgel. She dragged Emily in front of the house like she was reclaiming a missing heirloom. "Emily, get inside. Don't you dare side with him." Except Emily didn't move. She stood on the porch, hands on her hips, and said loud enough for the street to hear, "I knew. I saw the notes. I just never had—" She faltered, then spit the words like acid. I didn't have the guts to stop it. Neighbors started taking sides. The church lady, who always baked for their dinner club, knocked on my window and handed me a plate of cookies with one hand and a sympathetic look with the other. The cousins started posting passive-aggressive comments on the neighborhood page. Mark started leaving voicemails on my phone. Threats, apologies, a frantic mix of both. At work, someone slipped a shredded page under my foreman's toolbox with family garbage scribbled on it. The physical stuff hurt in a way words never did. Dented metal, an empty mailbox, the bone-deep fatigue of being harassed in public. But there was a sweeter burn underneath. The photos were in color on other people's phones now. My parents couldn't file off the truth. The narrative that had smothered me for decades was out in the open, and it was changing the air around them. That night, as I patched up my dented door and watched voicemails pile up, I realized they'd chosen escalation. They brought muscle and shame and the old tricks. I only had one rule left. Document everything, and never let them tell the story again. Next, they escalate beyond yelling. They drag in strangers, make public accusations, and try to weaponize our family against me. I'll tell you how far they went, and exactly how I answered. When I left my parents' house after that screaming match, I thought that was the end of it, that I could just shut the door, go back to my apartment, and breathe. But unstable people don't let go quietly. They double down. 2 days later, my downstairs neighbor texted me a picture. My parents standing outside my building at 7 a.m., holding a cardboard box like they were delivering groceries. Except inside that box were childhood toys, a baby blanket, and a cracked photo frame of me as a toddler. On the glass in my mom's handwriting with the Sharpie, "Come home before it's too late." I nearly dropped my coffee when I saw it. They had dug through the attic, fished out my old things, vandalized them with their message, and then staged a performance outside my building like I was some runaway they could guilt-trip back. I didn't go outside. I just watched them from my window while my heart hammered so hard I thought my ribs might split. My dad paced, red-faced, calling someone on speakerphone, my guess my sister, while my mom kept looking up at my apartment window, craning her neck like some horror movie villain waiting for a curtain to twitch. When they finally left, I went downstairs and saw the box had been smashed open. The glass from the frame was scattered across the sidewalk. My blanket had been torn, ripped straight down the middle. It felt symbolic, like they were saying, "We can ruin what's yours if you don't obey." I wanted to ignore it, but then the harassment escalated. My job got dragged into it. A week later, HR called me into the office looking pale. Someone had left an anonymous voicemail accusing me of embezzling company funds and struggling with severe mental health issues that made me unsafe to work with clients. The voice was distorted, but it was my mother's phrasing. She has this way of stacking accusations together, like she's reading off bullet points at a PTA meeting. I had to sit there humiliated while my boss asked if I needed to take a leave of absence. I denied everything, and thankfully, my track record was spotless enough that they didn't buy into the smear campaign. But walking out of that meeting, my face burning, I realized something terrifying. My parents weren't just trying to get me back. They were trying to destroy me until I had no choice but to crawl back. That night I locked every door, pulled the curtains tight, and sat on the floor with that damn shredded baby blanket in my lap, shaking. And for the first time in my life I thought, if I don't fight back, they're going to crush me. They kept pushing until they broke themselves. I knew the only way to finish this was to make the lie loud. Quietly handing copies to cousins and posting a thread was a start. But a Facebook screenshot doesn't have the same gravity as watching your neighbor's eyes go from sympathetic to disgusted in real time. So I rented the little community room at the rec center on Saturday afternoon, printed the entire album on glossy paper, and laid it out like an exhibit. Pages from my childhood, my captions snipped and replaced with Mom's condemnations, Emily circled in sparkly ink with our shining star banners, receipts for the gifts and the empty boxes they pretended didn't exist. I put copies in an envelope on every chair with a plain note, "See for yourself." Emily came an hour before the doors opened. She touched the first photo. My 5-year-old face labeled difficult again, and her fingers shook. "I'm sorry," she said, not quite a whisper. No speeches, no excuses. Just that simple admission that felt like a small hammer against everything they'd built. Word spread faster than I expected. Former teachers, the PTA moms who'd always nodded at Mark's hedge work, neighbors who'd once clapped at holiday parties, people streamed in. I mounted the album pages on easels, set my phone on a tripod to live stream, and finally hit play on the voicemail folder I'd archived. Mom gaslighting me as an adolescent, Dad lecturing me into silence, the voice of a family that had trained a village to dismiss me. They came 5 minutes after the doors opened. Mark charged the doorway like a man possessed. He tried to snatch the easel with my kindergarten photo and wrench it down. His hand caught the edge of a stack of prints and sent them fluttering like dead birds. Linda screamed something about public humiliation and family honor. She made a grab for the phone on the tripod, yanked it, and the live stream went fuzzy for a second before I smacked the feedback on. "Stop! You can't..." Dad shoved past a woman with a grocery bag. Someone yelled, "Call the cops." I did. I also hit record on my phone with the screen facing them, because receipts were the only language they respected. Dad pushed me. Not a shove that could be argued away as heated. He grabbed my collar and swung me into a display table, prints scattered, glossy photos splayed out across the floor like confessionals. People gasped. A neighbor, Mrs. Alvarez, saint of the block, yelled for him to stop. He shoved her aside. That's when the muscle-bound cousin who had shown up earlier, the one Mark always used as moral backup, stepped between us and told Mark to chill. The cops arrived within 10 minutes. They separated everyone, took statements. I didn't press charges right then. Part of me wanted the neighborhood to watch the whole sordid machinery of their denial unravel on its own, but the officer explained that public assault and intimidation were real charges. When Mark realized cameras and witnesses had recorded him, something in his bravado faltered. For the first time, I saw fear flicker on his face. By Monday, the fallout hummed through the neighborhood like a fever. My boss had the nerve to ask if I was handling family stress, but after I showed him the timeline and the pile of messages and the recording of Dad shoving me, the company lawyer told HR not to entertain any anonymous accusations. Mark's church group called a meeting. People I'd grown up waving at crossed the street when they saw him. Mom's book club stopped returning her calls. Small things, petty things. Social ostracism that means everything in a town that once relied on borrowed respect. They came to my door that week. Linda crying, mascara streaks map-like down her cheeks, Mark's voice all bluster and then brittle apology. "Alex, please. We were wrong. You have to come back. The house, the holidays." He kept offering a list of things they thought would buy me. Redecorating my old room, therapy paid for, family dinners. They got louder and more unhinged the more I said no. I set the album on the kitchen table where it had started this. I thumbed to the back and found something I hadn't noticed before. A folded, brittle note tucked between pages, addressed to future us. In Mom's handwriting, it wasn't an apology, it was a plan. How to frame the kids at PTA meetings, which teachers to tip off, which stories to tell, to make Emily look fragile and me angry, how to lean into scarcity to make my gratitude performative. That was the last straw. The real ugly truth wasn't just favoritism. It was a deliberate, documented campaign to shape our lives into a reality that suited them. A manuscript of gaslighting. I burned it. Not in the house. No, I'd learned not to give them literal fuel, but in a little metal fire pit behind my apartment. Emily stood with me. We fed the album pages into the flame, the captions, the glitter ink, the taped pages Mom had tried to mend. As the paper curled and blackened, I said everything I had never been allowed to say aloud, that their favorites list had ruined my childhood, how their hands had smoothed over my wins, how their smug pride had tasted like betrayal. When the last page made a slow white curl and turned to ash, a bird landed on the fence like permission from the universe. I felt lighter and terrified at the same time. Revenge had been messy and public and, yes, savage in a way that made me flinch, but it had the sweetness of finality. They begged for forgiveness. They lied about the past, and then tried to bargain with the present. They offered gifts and apologies and the same old manipulations. I listened to every rehearsal of regret, and then I told them the truth. I won't erase what you did. You can rebuild, but you have to face the people you hurt. You can't have me in your house until you do. Emily stayed. We rebuilt small rituals. Coffee on Saturday, a dumb movie, a plant on the porch. She apologized to neighbors. She sent out texts explaining what happened and how she'd been complicit. It was slow and imperfect and messy as a scar. Mark went to anger management, not because he wanted to change, but because the church made it part of the condition to let him back into volunteer roles. Linda went to therapy and kept a notebook for a year, baby steps that felt like frost on a wound. The neighborhood never fully forgave them. That was justice in a small town. Social consequence, a steady withdrawal of the audience they used to perform for. I didn't get the apology I deserved in a neat little bow. I didn't get them to admit every lie in front of a microphone. But I took back my story, printed, photographed, archived, and I put it where it mattered, with people who would remember the real version. Some nights I still wake up to the burn-scent memory of that fire pit and the album's ash on my hands. I keep one scrap in a drawer, the corner of a photo where Mom's glitter ink didn't quite burn through, because I need a reminder that truth can be messy, and that sometimes you have to make a scene to be seen. They wanted me to come back into the picture they'd painted. I refused. Instead, I painted my own, worn, honest, and mine. If you liked the video, subscribe to the channel and like it. You can also watch more shocking stories in the playlist.